My work is a mixture of commissioned work and self-initiated stuff. So I don't know. If I'm doing my own work, I tend to work in a first thought, best thought kind of way. So it's usually just through play. I don't tend to plan things out too much. I keep an archive of imagery that I find interesting. So I'm always putting files on the computer, which, well, dragging things off of websites and that sort of thing. But also just like picking up secondhand books in charity shops and collecting art books and all sorts. Just like auction guides where you've just got 500 different Japanese carts or whatever, you know, just like there's so much that you can find online, but there's stuff which you're never going to find there. It's just that kind of that opportunistic moment that you find something in a shop. I used to love just going out on my bike and getting a coffee and drawing, either drawing from life or just writing my thoughts down, writing songs, writing poetry. And that's another thing. I find that the written word directly leads to imagery, and imagery leads to words. So it's that kind of conversation between things, and you have this back and forth, and then you get to that epiphany moment of, oh, that's what I want to do. I want this to be a short story, or I want this to be a painting, or I want this to be a sculpture. But I think, yeah, being open-minded and being willing to be taken in a certain direction. And I just don't like to plan things out too much, because I feel like you leave so much potential if you have that kind of that clear vision from the get-go. So I'm always open to having my mind changed. But I kind of like working somewhere between like a imagination and dream and reality, and so picking up little bits of information from things that have happened and things that things that I've thought about, and I like to just kind of make this cacophony of just nonsense, but there's feeling in there as well. I like reflections and shadows and I don't know, ways how the human form can still be in reality, but it's kind of like an aura almost. Like, I like the idea that your shadow is like an autonomous creature to yourself, and just kind of bringing that that kind of fairy tale-esque feel to reality. I've got some friends who they're more realist in their output and their drawing, and they might say slightly disparaging things like, "You can draw properly. Why don't you draw things as they are?" More so, like, I think it's that kind of argument that the work is naive. But I don't know. I feel like, why would you necessarily want to aspire to create something which looks like exactly like that thing? If you have photography, you have different processes that you can do that. I think if you can bring the imagination in and create like something which is just new. I mean, like, there's an argument that I have got stuck in a rut. This is what I do because this is what I've taught myself to do. Like, maybe I would be making different work if I'd studied painting at school, or if I'd gone into 3D design, but I went down that illustration route, and so my work is illustrative now. But I think it's good if you can do exercises where you try and draw in the way that you've not conditioned yourself to draw. I think just as much as it's important to look at different subject matter with an open mind, it's good to still analyze how you create work and how you create your line or your marks, and changing medium is important for that as well, just to keep things fresh. I get bored quite easily, so if I can go from one form to the other, it just feels like I'm working a different job, and yeah, it keeps me on my toes. And I think you make your best work when you're not necessarily, yeah, just stuck in that melee, you know. I don't know, it's hard to sort of trace back where your line comes from. Maybe the caves were the first art schools, you know. Like, it's very easy to to look at someone's drawing and say, oh, it's very Hockney, you know, like it's very easy to just to recognise other people's line within someone else's, and they were obviously learning from each other in the caves back then as well. So you learn by example, don't you? When I first moved down to Hastings, I signed up to the ceramic course at the college. So every Wednesday I'd be there for 3 hours in the evening, and mainly slip casting previously formed vases. And so with slip casting, you have a mould and you pour your liquid clay in, and then you let that set for some time, pour out the excess, and then once that's dried in its mould, you can open it up and you've got this pre-made form. And that was just like it's like having a pre-stretched canvas. So you've got your form to work with, and I would scrape back and kind of give it a slightly more rough finish. But I went on to then sort of make my own moulds and produce my own vases like that. And but also hand building things, so you can get a more kind of wonky, chunkier design. I love the intricacy of like the sort of ancient artifacts, so just like ancient Greek vases and old Chinese pieces where you have this three-dimensional narrative, and it doesn't matter where you come at it, you have that 360 degrees, which the story just goes on forever, and you can just discover new things. I suppose this is a reaction to Hastings carnival life. You know, it's just a bunch of drummer girls. Any excuse to bang a drum in this town. I created it not long after going out on a bonfire night, but I wasn't using specific reference for it. It was just more of the kind of the idea of what a drumming band looks like, and I think the fact that I'm not actually working from reference, it means that I can just put the brush to the ceramic and just get on with it quite quickly. This is a stoneware-fired cobalt oxide vase. So this is a slip cast form. We have this dreamlike vision of floating nude women, and it was a gift for my girlfriend. And this is created by actually painting coloured slip onto the inside of the mould before you then pour the liquid clay in, and then once it starts setting in the mould, when you pull it away, you're left with this flattened image. I feel like any opportunity to throw a spanner in the works when you're creating work is desirable. Like, I love that element of chance which can sort of transform the final outcome. These are, they could be coffee cups or tumblers for wine or whatever beverage you choose. I think that it's nice if there can be some play between the object and their purpose, or the person using them. But I get a lot of joy through repetition and doing the same image again and again. But just because we are these perfect robots, they'll always come out slightly different. There's a particular piece of mine, and it's called In the Tar Pit, and it's a hand-built form that I've created, and I've used a really ancient technique of sgraffito, where you put a coloured glaze over the clay, and then you scrape back and you reveal the raw clay underneath, and then you fire that and you have this two-tone piece. And then I've worked back in with oxides after that, or sgraffito pencils, where you've got glaze within a pencil form, so you can work on with, it just feels like charcoal, but it's actually glaze, and then you fire it again and you have this immortalized pencil line. But within the tar pit, it's the idea that you're looking at a cross section of ground, and all of these creatures which are preserved in this sort of static, floating, so they're just all these different creatures and animals. I've made a series of large heads, and that's what really excites me. It's making the bigger things, and it's that juxtaposition where I'm usually working quite small. I'm using a fine brush and I'm working on a small scale, but if I can slap some mud around and make something big and bulbous, and I mean, like, once it's fired, I might go back in and be more delicate with it again, but I like making those statement pieces. This is the sister map to what was the first one, which was the Coastal Culture Trail. We produced a second map which is connecting Eastbourne to Brighton and just showing the different sites of cultural interest between there. It links up the Hastings Contemporary, the Delaware Pavilion in Bexhill, and the Towner Gallery over in Eastbourne. And they're trying to encourage people to cycle or walk between the three. And yeah, you've got quite a lot of cultural attractions within that area as well. But just about kind of getting that that tourist injection, just to show people what's in the area. So it's just highlighting some of the places of interest in Sussex. So got the Towner Art Gallery, and here's Alfriston, Charleston Farmhouse and Monk House. There's Lewes Castle, Glyndebourne with this lovely lady playing the harp, and over to Ditchling Museum of Art and Craft. There isn't a large stone head there, but maybe one day there will be. But I also do live portrait events, so I have people come and sit for me, and I'll ink their portrait in sort of 20 minutes or so. Not caricatures, but like just sort of like loose illustrative drawings of people. I work in a relatively minimalist way, so it's kind of as few marks as possible to try and get that personality through. So it's working out what makes them look like them, because it's very easy to look at someone and you let your perception of what someone looks like influence what you're drawing, but you have to really pay attention to what that person is. So yeah, I also illustrate books, either working with other authors or my own writing. Like this one came out this year. This is My Sneezes Are Perfect by Rakshan Rizwan. This was a fun book to work on because Rakshan has a 6-year-old son, and she wrote through the eyes of her son and with her son on this project. So it's a series of musings and sort of reflections on what her son Yusuf is going through. So his interests and his disgusts as well, and like living through COVID times, talking about how his sneezes are much better than his sister's. So there's a lot of snot and burps and farts. Postcard Stories and Postcard Stories 2 by Jan Carson. Jan did a project where she would write a story and send it to someone on a postcard. She did that for some reasonable period of time, and then she collected all of these stories and had them published as one anthology and then a second. Yeah, it's a really nice balance of oddness and just kind of like a sweet surrealness as well. Graphic novel is it's still got a working title, but it's all about a Jewish woman in her 90s probably, because she's a Holocaust survivor, and she's in the Lower East Side of New York, and it's about her sort of travel through the part of the city that she used to know very well, but she's with her grandson now, and she's kind of, I don't know, a little bit bombarded with what gentrification's done to the sort of town that she knew, and she's it's this sort of this conflict between young and old, and how the city's changed. As an adult, the idea of needing to read a book with pictures in, you're considered a bit of a delinquent maybe. I think we have quite a different relationship to graphic novels than the rest of Europe. And I don't know, I think that they are, I think creating imagery is quite a, it can be quite an academic thing, you know, like there's a lot that can be communicated through imagery that can't be communicated through words, so why would you try and translate that when the drawn artifact does the job perfectly? I can relate to the monkeys, but I've always said that I was probably a dog in a previous life, so yeah, need constant reassurance and petting and whatnot, yeah.